Think winter is rough now? Step into a medieval night. Wind knifes through wattle walls. Smoke tangles in hair. A family huddles by embers, sharing the room with a cow. No double glazing, no Netflix, only wool, salt, and ingenuity. How did they not just survive, but brew, store, play, and plan the cold away from box beds and roller skates to pickle? The season always began with sound. The first hard frost clicking the thatch. A door bar settling for the night. The cough of a cow whose warm breath fogged the air. Most rural houses in Western Europe were wattle and daub, wrapped around timber, ribs, and a clay floor. Insulation was a wish, not a wall. The hearth sat at the center like a minor deity, smoke creeping toward roof vents that leaked just enough to keep the rafters from smoldering, and more than enough to perfume everything. Hair, tunic, bread with soot. If there was a loft, a ladder led up to storage, and sleeping pallets. If there was a buyer, it sometimes adjoined the main room, so the body heat of cattle, pigs, and chickens donated a few precious degrees. Cozy?
By the laws of
Yes.
the council, this
If
fur
your
is
idea
reserved
of
for the
cozy
highest nobility.
includes the
Your
conversation
display
of hens
wealth
at
is an
dawn
insult to
and
the
a fragrance
established
note
order,
somewhere
sir.
between wood smoke and barn. Stone walls helped against fire and raiders, but were brutal to heat. Glass windows belonged to bishops and kings. In the 13th century, the Palace of Westminster famously added glazing to reduce winter drafts in high-status chambers. It helped keep the wind out, not the cold. Further south, on the Ele de Maguelone, cathedral windows were seasonally sealed with plaster to blunt the Mistral's bite. Most
Such a
people
welcome
made do
warmth
with shutters,
after the cold
oiled
outside.
cloth, paper,
yay, it
or
truly
even
is.
foliage wedged into openings to turn a gale into a gasp. Doors were thick where wood was cheap, thinner where it wasn't, and everywhere the line between inside and weather was negotiable. Heat came in layers and cleverness. Linen smooth, washable, quick-drying, kissed the skin first. Over it, wool trapped air and stubbornly refused to surrender warmth.
Domine exaudi
The itch of
orationem
coarse
meam,
wool was not
in
a
nomine
romantic
Patris
legend.
et Filii
It
et
was a daily
Spiritus
truth,
Sancti.
softened by
Amen.
that life-saving linen. Scarves and hoods moved inside when the wind did. Mittens were as useful by the hearth as in the lane. And cloaks slept on shoulders and beds alike. Where means allowed, garments were lined with fur. Where they didn't, rabbit and lambskins did yeoman's work at cuffs and collars. Laws tried to police these luxuries. England's sumptuary laws of 1363,
Well met,
part
Master
etiquette
Marco.
and part
Good day to
enforcement
you.
of class
A
boundaries,
cold one, for
told
sure.
certain people what they could not wear. The poor needed luck or permission to hunt small game. A snare set without rights might warm the body and imperil the neck. Priests and prosperous townsfolk sometimes cradled hand warmers, perforated metal shells filled with glowing charcoal that kept fingers supple during long winter rites.
It is
Bricks
gone.
baked at the hearth
Everything
and
is
wrapped in
gone.
cloth made fine
What will we do
bedfellows.
now?
So did heated stones tucked at the feet. In regions where the tradition existed, tiled stoves and masonry heaters captured flames in ceramic bellies and released the heat slowly. Elsewhere,
Steady now,
the
keep
open
the pace
hearth
up.
ruled, generous
We're nearly
with light
across
and
this
smoke,
stretch.
stingy with efficiency. Tapestries and heavy woven hangings were more than decoration on cold stone. They were windbreaks, each square yard a modest act of engineering. Floors dressed
This
in
wool
rushes
is
or reed
incredibly
mats
soft.
blunted the chill. Beds themselves learned
It
to
should
be
make a
architecture.
fine tunic for the
Box
master.
beds with sliding panels kept sleepers nestled in their own microclimate. And yes, people shared beds, kin, guests, even strangers, because warmth is a social technology. Not all winters, even grim ones, were the same. The Little Ice Age, a long, irregular, cool period beginning around the 14th century, arrived not like a switch, but like weather's bad habit. A string of years with harsher cold snaps, late springs, odd storms, and regional tantrums. In the 1,360 seconds, parts of Central and Southern Europe recorded rivers and lagoons gone rigid under ice. The Rhine reportedly froze long enough near Mainz for crossings that felt like miracles or mischief. And there were winters when the Venetian lagoon wore a glassy mask. In Italy, chroniclers in Florence and Bologna described snow that rose to eaves and made streets into tunnels, roofs groaning under white weight that had to be shoveled off before houses gave up. Some accounts read like a disaster log. Farms crushed, stores exhausted, towns sealed until thaw. Elsewhere, the North shrugged, Scandinavians strapped on skis for hunting and errands, sledges slid where carts would fail. What stopped a Lombard might merely delay a Swede. Weather is local. So is the resilience it asks for. Travel narrowed to daylight. Roads hardened into bone and ruts froze into cruel memory. In the best cases, rivers briefly offered smooth highways of ice. In the worst, they became traps that groaned and cracked under any fool without a staff to test the way. Caravans shortened their ambitions, messages learned patience, but winter was not only a
It
throttle.
seems the night is
It was
still
also
young,
a
my
schedule.
friends.
Brewing
Double or
like
nothing.
crisp air, slaughter and salting were winter tasks because meat kept tools rested from fields and worked in hands. Handles fitted, baskets woven, harness
According
mended,
to this, your
wool spun
constitution
into
requires
thread that would be
balance.
cloth by
More
spring.
importantly, it permits
All
the
of this
consumption of this
depended on a
excellent
quiet
vintage,
race that
in
started
moderation, of
months
course.
earlier. The race to stack enough fuel and food between the present and the relief of April. Wood gathering was not a hobby. It was survival, disciplined by rites and customs. In some places, commoners had estovers, customary rights to take dead wood or cut limited timber. In others, a lord's woods were a lord's, and winter tempted the desperate to trespass with axes muffled in cloth. Fuel ate time, cut, carry, cure, stack again. A household that miscalculated did not so much get cold as make a string of bad choices, smaller and more dangerous. Pantry and palate were chemistry and fate. Pickling, salting, smoking, drying, brining, each
This is
verb
my
a
wood. I
different
dragged it from
equation
the
for
Northwood.
stopping rot.
Liar!
Autumn
It fell on
filled
my
ceramic
land.
jars
Get your
and
hands off
wooden
it.
tons with vegetables born for patience. Fruit turned leathery over racks or bright and biting under vinegar. Fish stiffened into boards or exhaled sweet smoke from rafters. Grain was not just bread waiting for a mill, it was porridge, gruel, pottage, one pot that could feed many and hide anything the garden gave up. Pulses bulked the belly and balanced the field. Peas and beans waited in sacks like edible weeds of time. Milk became work, churned into butter when the pasture still sang, coaxed into cheeses whose rinds guarded the summer's grass for winter knives. In the far north, Skyer a cultured dairy, thick as duty-anchored diets, and the way it left behind salted and soured meats with surprising efficiency. When storms fenced people in and the bucket clanged empty, snow itself melted down to cook and drink, though any housewife would tell you snow is mostly a lesson in how air tastes. Sometimes winter came early and never seemed to leave. In 1315, rains began and did not keep their promises. Fields drowned, seed rotted, haymows sulked, and cattle pushed skin over ribs. Grain yields collapsed, fodder thinned. A bad autumn married a worse spring, and famine moved in for a stay. Over 2 miserable years, 1,315 to 1,317 Europe bled from the mouth and the purse. We read in court rolls
How was
and
your day, my
chronicles
love?
of theft
It was good.
that had
A
no
bit
villain
cold,
but
but
hunger,
good.
of desperate crimes and feverish rumors, of villages trading, charity,
Is it
and
getting
suspicion
warmer in
like
here yet?
currency. Scholars estimate that
Slowly,
1.5
my dear.
to 3 million people died before the cycle eased and recovery crept toward 1,322. Later, the Black Death would scythe more lives, but the Great Famine taught a colder lesson that weather's stubbornness and fragile logistics could make even a careful household powerless. A root rots in one county, a road washes out in another, a lord calls in debts in a third, and the arithmetic of survival no longer adds up. Against that arithmetic, people set ritual and play. Snow, when it came kindly, became a toy. Children learned balance on bones strapped to shoes, horse shins polished to a fearful shine or on bent wood, and later iron edges whispered on ice like knives too polite to cut. Snowballs rehearsed throwing arms and packed laughter into welts that would fade by supper. Indoors, thumbs learned the patience of spinning. Stories grew warm in the telling. Chessboards and backgammon counters marched across tables. Dice bounced, prayers tilted slightly toward good luck. Nor were hunters idle. Winter bore Hunt's braided food, danger, and prestige into a day that could end in meat or mourning. Doctors, those who wrote, at least had their own explanations and advice. Medieval learned medicine loved balance, and humoral theory said winter fattened men. One widely copied compendium, the Secretum Secretorum, begged readers to favor warm foods, pigeon, game, mutton, and good red wine, and to avoid bloodletting, laxatives, and overexertion when the cold already pulled heat inward. We can smile at the physiology and still respect the pattern. Winter is a season of careful appetites, of steering the body's candle away from drafts. In practice, people ate what the storeroom offered and what feast days demanded. Advent asked patience. Christmas and the 12 days that followed forgave it with fat and spice if the larder was kind. What about cities? Walls broke wind, but pooled breath. Narrow lanes tunneled chill and rumor alike. Guild halls could be warmer than the houses that fed them. Churches were refrigerators wrapped in music. Bakers woke when even the stars felt sleepy, and their ovens loaned heat to neighbors. Markets shrank with daylight, yet thickened with news. In a hard freeze, some towns dared fairs on ice. Elsewhere, bridges took the strain and collected the tolls. The rich bought comfort that the poor rented by the hour. Better fuel, thicker fabrics, rooms that turned drafts into whispers. But even palaces had their limits. A king can command a brazier. He cannot command January.
You know this fur
We should
is
also talk
forbidden
about what
for common
winter
folk.
did to tempers and souls. Crowding makes families into weather systems. Smoke in the rafters makes eyes leak and lungs complain. A cough in a room of 10 is a rumor in a week and an illness by the holiday. Winters saw baptisms hastened, funerals quieted, quarrels mended because the fields were sleeping and there was time to be human for better and worse. Love was warmer when bodies did the practical thing and shared blankets. Violence simmered an ale that was 1 cup too strong. A borrowed log returned late could sour neighbors until spring. Survival fostered both mutual aid and petty hoarding, often in the same street. Through all of it runs a grammar of making do that deserves admiration more than romance. The materials are unglamorous: air, water, wool, fire, salt, time. The tools are simple. A pot that never empties because every day something small joins the stew. A cloak that is a tent, that is a blanket. A bed that is a room inside a room. A door that is a wall that is. At need. A table when the neighbors come to card. The ingenuity sits in combination and cadence. Hang the tapestry before the north wind learns your house.
Look at me!
Heat the brick while the soup is
Watch
thinking.
out!
Stack the wood where the rain can't argue. Set the trapdoor where the child can't find it. Tell the story where the old man laughs even when the punchline is older than he is. It is easy, from a house that hums and glows at the press of a switch, to sentimentalize the past or to sneer at it.
boy!
The people who trimmed rushes for floors and boiled whey for pickles did neither. They lived between the certainty of winter and the uncertainty of everything else, and they made a culture out of the gap. They learned where to put the bed, how to wrap the baby, when to trust the ice, which saint to thank when the cow calved in a gale. They also learned that nature does not negotiate and that society sometimes refuses to. Laws told them what fur they could wear. Lords told them what wood they could cut. Weather told them how tall to stack their hopes. And yet there were always hands next door to help lift a beam, always a neighbor who knew the trick with the chimney, always a widow who remembered a recipe that wasted nothing and fed 5. So, how did medieval people survive
I baptize
the
thee in the name of the Father,
cold with
and of the
smoke-stung
Son, and
eyes
of the Holy
and
Spirit?
clever fingers,
May our past
with
disagreements
linen under
be forgotten.
wool and
Indeed,
laughter
to
under
new
worry,
beginnings.
with salted meat and faith in spring, with skis where the world allowed it and sledges where it didn't, with coin when they had it and credit when they didn't, with a family pressed close, a cow politely sharing her breath, a priest warming his hands over a pocket brazier, a child tracing
little
ice
something
with
to
a
warm
bone
you.
strapped to a shoe. They survived by making heat not just from
Thank
flame,
you,
but
you are
from
too
company,
kind.
and by treating winter not as an enemy to defeat, but as a fact to manage, sometimes gracefully, sometimes grimly, always practically. When you walk out into a frosty morning and see your breath, remember that your lungs are doing medieval technology. Condensation as a reminder that you're still here. Remember that a tapestry is a physics lesson, that a stew pot is a safety net, that a shared bed is an alliance. And remember that the Little Ice Age was not a frozen monolith, but a braid of colder moments that demanded local answers, some brilliant, some insufficient, all human. Winter was frightening, yes, but it also taught the art of enough. Enough heat to sleep, enough salt to last, enough patience to reach a day when doors could be left open again and smoke would rise purely for the smell of a feast. Keep your hands near the fire and your stories nearer. If you want more history that warms without blurring, subscribe and ring the bell. We'll be here next week, whatever the weather decides.